okay, requires a calculator. So everybody get your calculator out and put it on your desk. And your calculator needs to have the trig buttons, sine, cosine, and tangent, which you should all have. It looks like sin, cos, and tan, okay? For those of you that have this one, because I feel like this is the majority of the calculators that I see, they're right in the middle. Sin, cos, tan, okay? This is trigonometry. Trigonometry is so fun. Right triangle trig, super fun. I don't even love all the other trig necessarily, but right triangle trig is the best. No, but I mean, there are things, we're not going to get into all of that. We're not going that far with trig, but we're taking the sine of things, the cosine of things, and the tangent of things is basically what we're doing. Okay, so here's the deal. People are always like, what in the world is sine? And what in the world is cosine? And what in the world is tangent? Because we're pushing this button and it magically does something to these numbers that we're working with. Yes, it's not magic, actually. It's math. Trig functions are just something that relate an angle to side lengths in a triangle. There is a relationship between how angles and different sides relate to each other, and the buttons take care of that relationship for you. So you don't have to try and plug in all these like crazy things. Like you would never be able to do it by hand. It wouldn't happen. So these brilliant mathematicians created a button that will do it all for you, okay? But it really is just a relationship between side lengths and angles, how it all goes together, okay? So I'm going to show you what sine and what cosine and tangent, what they all are, and the relationship that they form here with the triangle that you're looking at on my screen right now, and hopefully on yours because you're taking brilliant notes. So here's the setup, okay? The sine of an angle is the opposite side. And this is going to mean nothing to you right now. Just write it down, and then I'm going to explain it to you, okay? But I want you to have it. The opposite side over the hypotenuse, okay? The cosine of an angle, in this case, we're going to say angle A, is the adjacent side. What does adjacent mean? Next to, adjacent, next to, over the hypotenuse. Okay, and then the tangent of an angle is the opposite side over the adjacent side. Okay? Okay, so first important thing is you always need to know what angle is being referred to, because the sine of A is very different than the sine of B. Okay, so pay attention to what they're asking you to find the sine of. So for this case, sin A, it looks like that's the sine of A. So sin, cos, tan, that's sine, cosine, and tangent. They will always shorten it, abbreviate it. This is the actual word that represents that three-letter word, okay? When they say to find the sine of A, here's what you do. You find the angle that they're talking about, right? So A is A. You start from there. You always start from the angle. From that angle, look at what the sine is. It's opposite over hypotenuse. So you ask yourself, now we're talking side lengths. What is opposite angle A? What side length is opposite angle A? It's what? It's segment BC. Right? Opposite angle A, basically we're saying across from angle A is A. Okay, so opposite is A. Over, what's the hypotenuse? C. Hypotenuse is always across from the right angle. So when they say, what is the sine of A? You say A over C. Opposite over hypotenuse. Okay? Then they say, find the cosine of A. Where do you start? At A, right? You always, always, always start at the angle, okay? From the angle, we're trying to find the adjacent side, and we're going to put it over the hypotenuse. Now, this one's a little bit tricky for some, because if I'm at A and I ask which side is next to angle A, there's two. But I think you can probably figure out which one I'm talking about when I call it adjacent. The one that's not the hypotenuse, okay? So you have two sides that are next to A, this side here and this side here. Well, this side, that's a hypotenuse, and we have a name for that, hypotenuse, right? So the adjacent one is the one that's not the hypotenuse, but it's next to the angle. So if that's the case, then when I say the cosine of A, I say what over what? What is adjacent right now? B. This is your adjacent side. Okay, so that's B. And then your hypotenuse, that's this side, is C. So cosine A is B over C. Okay, last one. The tangent of angle A. Where do you start?
The opposite.
Opposite, but always start from what? The angle, right? Start from A. So from angle A, what is opposite? A. This is your opposite side. So A over B, your adjacent side, the one that's next to it, right? A over B. Do you love trig? You're going to love it. You're going to love it. Okay. So there's a little way to help you remember all these things, because if I were just to say, know this, you'd be like, like that's too much information. So instead they give you this word called SOHCAHTOA. Have you heard of SOHCAHTOA? You're going to get very friendly with SOHCAHTOA. SOHCAHTOA. Know how to spell it. If you spell it wrong, you do everything wrong. So, S-O-H, C-A-H, TOA, T-O-A, okay? So this is sine is opposite over hypotenuse. Cosine is adjacent over hypotenuse. Tangent is opposite over adjacent. Now, I like it better. I don't remember, a couple years ago, one of my students was like, here's how I write SOHCAHTOA, and it's so cute. So I'm going to do it like that for you, and hopefully you like it too. So, TOA, right? Sine is opposite over hypotenuse. Cosine is adjacent over hypotenuse. Tangent is opposite over adjacent. I agree. Okay, SOHCAHTOA. Make sure you're spelling it correctly. It will be very helpful in the future. Does everyone understand where that's all coming from? Okay. So this first question, I feel like when you get to the homework, you're going to try to do too much on this question because you're going to have learned the further stuff in the homework, which feels a lot fancier. Don't overthink questions, okay? If they ask you for the sine, cosine, and tangent ratios for an angle, what's a ratio? Something over something, right? It's a fraction. Something over something. That's all you're giving here, okay? Here's your steps. You are going to start at the given angle, which in this first problem is what? What's the angle they're talking about? Angle P. Okay, so in this case, we're talking angle P. Okay, start from the angle. Second step is choose, are we doing sine, are we doing cosine, or are we doing tangent? And then from there, you can set up, it shouldn't be and, set up a ratio. So here's the deal. If I asked you to find the sine of P, okay, the sine of P. First of all, sine is what over what? Right. Write SOHCAHTOA on the top of every homework assignment. Write it out, okay? Then you don't have to think about what is what. You just go, oh yeah, sine, opposite over hypotenuse. So I'm going to take the opposite over the hypotenuse, starting at what letter? Starting at P. So I'm starting from right here. From P, what side is opposite? 15. Across from P is 15. So it's opposite over what?
17.
Hypotenuse. Your hypotenuse is always across from the 90. Sine P is 15 over 17. Okay, so that's the sine P ratio. Cosine P. Okay, first of all, where do you start? You're gonna get so sick of me asking that question, but if I don't keep asking it, people like start in weird places. Start from the angle, start from P, right? From P, cosine is adjacent over hypotenuse. What is adjacent at P? 8. Next to, but not the hypotenuse, right? So adjacent is 8 over the hypotenuse, which is 17. Okay, and then the last one, find the tangent of P. Okay, and again, start at the angle from P. Tangent is opposite, which is 15, over adjacent, which is 8. So tan P is 15 over 8.
If you were able to reduce it, would you want us to reduce it to simplest form?
Yeah, if you can reduce a ratio, reduce it. A lot of the time you won't be able to, but in the homework there are a few that you can. So yeah.
Do you say 8 over 17 or 8 to 17?
I don't care. Either one is fine. Yeah. Questions on that? Okay. The rest of these are what you're going to spend majority of your time on in this lesson. Example 2 here. Now notice what's happening. You're given an angle, you're given a side length, and you're solving for a side length. Well, all of our ratios involve an angle and 2 side lengths, right? So we're going to set up a ratio, and then we're just going to have to solve for it, which is where your calculators are going to come in real handy right now. Okay, so the steps are the same. You start at a given angle. Which angle are we given? 84, but we're also given 90, right? Don't ever use 90. It doesn't work from the 90. So whatever other angle you know, that's the angle you want to use. So we're going to start from right here. Here's 84. Okay, then what you do from there is you ask yourself what trig function, okay, so same rules apply. Go up here, start from the given angle. Now choose, am I using sine, cosine, or tangent? Now look at what you have. From 84, what side do we call this? That's the opposite side. What side do we call this? The adjacent side. So if you have the opposite side and the adjacent side, which trig function uses those two? Tangent, right? That's the TOA part, opposite over adjacent. So we're going to say the tangent, and now here's the other kicker. It's the question I always ask you. Where are you starting from? The angle. That's what always comes after your trig function. What the sine, cosine, or tangent should always have the angle right behind it. So it's going to be the tangent of 84. Okay? The tangent of the angle equals what over what? Opposite over adjacent. How we doing? Callie?
You wouldn't put feet right.
No, we're not going to label anything until the very end. Yeah, thank you. Okay, so here's the deal. At this point, it's algebra, but it's maybe algebra that you haven't touched for a while. So pay attention here if you're not sure how to solve this for x. Does anyone know what your first step would be? It feels kind of wrong, but...
Multiply x each side?
Yes, you're going to multiply by x on both sides. That'll get x out of the denominator here and move it over to the other side as a numerator. Okay, so you multiply both sides by x. So I'm just going to rewrite the problem. You don't have to at this point, but I'm going to do it for the sake of those that would maybe have a tough time following if I left a mess. Okay, so this is what we have right now. X times the tangent of 84 equals 48. Okay, how do you solve for x? I don't expect you to know this because you've not worked with tangents before, but I'm just curious what your instincts would say. Divide by 84, but you can't, right now, 84 is not a number by itself. It's the tangent of 84 that we're working with. So you divide by the tangent of 84. Okay, so this goes away, and now you have x equals, and this is what you're gonna plug into your calculator, okay? And you must plug this into your calculator right now because sometimes calculators are in the wrong mode, and I need to know if you're in the right mode or not. You always wanna be in degree mode, so if your calculator says rad or grad on it right now, you're in the wrong mode, okay? On this calculator, right here, it says DRG. It should say DEG on your screen if you're in degree mode, okay? So plug in this 48 divided by, and then the tan button, and then 84.
Wait, 48 divided by 10 button.
Tan button, and then 84, and then hit enter, and you should get 5.0 feet. Okay, it comes out to 5.04500032. Is anyone not getting that when they plug it in?
Can you just write 5 feet?
Nearest tenth, so 5.0. Yes, 0.0 is nearest tenth, right? Don't leave the zero off. If you say 5, it could have been 5.1, 5.2, 5.3, 5.4. So put that 0 on there. Questions on that? Okay.
How did you know that the x was the adjacent side? Like, how do you do it?
So from the angle, right? We always are going from the angle they gave us.
Yeah.
This one is also adjacent, but it's the hypotenuse. So we don't want that side. We want the one that's next to it. So we want the one that's forming the angle, right? These two lines are the ones forming the angle.
Oh, right.
So that's next to it. This one's across from it, so that's the opposite side. Yeah, William. Bring that up here. I'll show you real fast. Okay, example 3. Where are we starting? So you go mode, and then you're in radians. You're gonna go over to degree, hit enter, and then you can just quit, and now you're in degree mode, okay? Start at the 37, yes. So from the 37, okay, here's my starting point. Then figure out which trig function we're gonna use. What 2 sides do we have? Opposite, that is terrible. Opposite is the x, right? It's across from our angle. And this is our hypotenuse, okay? Which trig function uses opposite and hypotenuse? Sine, yes. So we're gonna say the sine of what? 37. The angle always comes after the trig function. Sine 37 equals x over 10. Opposite over hypotenuse. Okay, now this one's simpler. How do you solve for x? You multiply by 10 on both sides. That becomes 1. So this is what you plug into your calculator. Plug in 10 sine 37. You don't even have to do times. It assumes times. So 10 sine 37, hit enter. What do you get? 6.0. Okay, nearest tenth would be 6.0. Okay. That's just approximately. We're rounding, right? You don't have to do that. It's just, yeah, you may leave it just as an equal sign. That's fine.
So for when it's like x over 10, you always multiply by the denominator, then it will cancel it out. So then plug that in to get rid of the numbers.
Yes, yeah. Okay, take a look at this one. Where are you starting? 58. From the 58, what is this side? Adjacent. What is this side? Hypotenuse. Okay, so you ask yourself the question, which trig function uses the adjacent and the hypotenuse? Cosine, right? If you look at SOHCAHTOA, okay, here's our SOHCAHTOA. Adjacent and hypotenuse is cosine. So we're going to say the cosine of what? 58 equals x over 9, adjacent over hypotenuse. Okay, how do you solve that for x? Multiply by 9. Multiply by 9 there, multiply by 9 there. This is what you're going to plug into your calculator because x is isolated on the other side now. So plug in 9 cosine 58. And what do you get to the nearest tenth? 4.8. This one had units, so we'll call it inches. And you're good. Copper.
How are you knowing when it's cosine, tan, or sin?
So you always start at the angle, right? So whatever angle they give you, you go, okay, here's my jumping off point. From that angle, what sides do I have? I have the adjacent side in my x. I have the hypotenuse in my 9, and adjacent and hypotenuse only show up together in cosine.
Oh, okay.
Okay. Okay. Sorry about where the 31 is on here. Is that where your 31 is also?
Yeah.
Sorry. That's just this angle. Try this one on your own. See if you can set it up. Ask yourself, where am I starting? Which trig function am I using? Set it up. See if you can solve it. Does anyone have an answer? What'd you get?
11.6.
Everybody else get 11.6? Okay, it is 11.6. Let's set it up for those of you that maybe aren't getting 11.6. So you start from the angle, okay? From this angle, this is what side? The 6. That's your opposite, okay? The x is your hypotenuse across from the 90. It's a funky 90, sorry. So with that, opposite and hypotenuse, if you look at SOHCAHTOA, right, this guy right here, opposite and hypotenuse happens with sine. That's the S. So we know we're using sine. The sine of what? Always the angle, 31. So sine 31 is opposite over hypotenuse. And then how do you solve that? Multiply by x. Get the variable out of the denominator. Okay, so this is 1. That goes away. So now you have x sine 31 equal to 6, and we want to solve for x. So get rid of everything else by dividing by the sine of 31. Okay, and you plug this into your calculator. 6 divided by the sine of 31, and you should have gotten 11.6. Okay, yeah. Oh, that was weird. Annika, go ahead.
Basically, if the x is in the denominator, you just
Divide.
sin by
Look
that
at you finding all the shortcuts to the shortcut again. Yes, you do. Yep. Okay, last thing. Sometimes they won't give you the angle measure. Sometimes the angle measure will be the thing that's missing. The process is very similar. You do one thing different at the end, okay? So to find angle measures, you're going to use, it's called the inverse function on your calculator. It looks like this. Anyone see where that is on your calculator?
Yeah, press the second.
It's the second key. So if you hit second and then that button, you'll see it. Except that, William, did you find all your trig buttons? Oh, no, I'm thinking of something different. Those are in the same spot for you. Yeah, you're good. So yeah, second sine will give you the inverse sine. The same as this is, it's called arcsine, arctan, arccosine. That's the inverse, okay? So if you hear people talk about arcsine or the inverse of sine, it's the same thing. It's that little to the negative first power on your calculator, okay? Okay, so when you're solving for a degree, here's the deal. Number 6 here, it says, what is the measure of angle T to the nearest degree? I would, if I were you, just put an X in there, just so you have this, like, this is where I'm at, okay? I want to know X degrees. How many degrees is X right now? So you do the same process. Where do you start? At X. Start here. What sides do you have? You have the opposite side here, the hypotenuse here. So what trig function are you using? That's sine, opposite over hypotenuse, right? It's the so part of SOHCAHTOA. So we're going to say the sine of what? Of X. The sine of X equals 7 over 13. Now here's the deal. You cannot divide by sine because sine X is what's getting us a value. So what we do is we take the inverse of it, okay? So how we do that is we say X equals, take the inverse of our ratio, okay? So you're gonna plug into your calculator, make sure this is how it's second, and then the sine button, and then 7 divided by 13. You don't have to finish off your parenthesis there, but you can if it bothers you to leave it open-ended. And whenever we round with angle measures, we typically do a whole degree. So this comes out to 32.5789. What is that to the nearest degree? 33 degrees. Okay, so X is 33 degrees. So just make sure this is the button, the -1 is the button you're using, the second key, and then sine, okay? Last one. The measure of angle T. So here's T, call it X. Can you tell me which trig function you're gonna use? It's cosine. You have the adjacent and you have the hypotenuse, right? So COA is cosine. So it's gonna be the cosine of X equals what over what? 8 over 10. Okay? Whenever you solve for an angle, you must use the inverse. So X is going to equal the inverse cosine or the arc cosine of 8 over 10. See if you can plug that in correctly and tell me what you get. To the nearest degree, 37 degrees. You should get 36.86989. So X is 37 degrees.